Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Professor Norman Hutchison, and on behalf of the University of Aberdeen Business School, Alumni Relations and Careers, a very warm welcome to the University, to our Connect, Inspire and Succeed seminar. Before we start, there's just one piece of housekeeping, if I could, please. There are no planned fire alarms this evening, so if the alarm does sound, please leave the building as you entered, if it's safe to do so, or by following the signs to the nearest exit. Also, if you could perhaps put your mobile phones to silent, please. The Connect, Inspire, Succeed programme has been created for alumni and businesses to learn, develop skills, and to network in order to support your career and personal development. We want to encourage conversations that will inspire you to think differently and make the most of the network around you. The programme of events includes workshops tailored to supporting professional development. You'll see on the slide behind me the different workshops that are to come shortly. It gives me great pleasure to introduce you to Dr Tharaka Gunarathne, Dr T. He is a graduate of the University School of Medicine, Medical Sciences and Nutrition, and we really are delighted to have him back on campus to launch this new series. 4 years ago, in this very room, Dr T was invited to deliver his first TEDx talk on the power of shifting the way you think. This was the catalyst for him to start his business a year later. From February 2017, Dr T has worked with global businesses to maximize performance and find deeper fulfillment in life. Dr T is a consultant clinical psychiatrist and medical educator, delivering high-energy, engaging keynotes and training on personal development, communication, skills, and leadership. He helps people develop high-performance thinking, emotional intelligence, and a refreshed sense of purpose, superior motivation levels, effective presentation skills, and a stronger team cohesion. I, for one, have certainly benefited from all those things. I think we're going to have a very exciting evening, and could you please welcome Dr T.
Thank you, Norman. Well, good evening. Do we have any happy people here today? Yeah, very good, very good. It's an absolute delight for me to be here with you, to be back here with the University of Aberdeen. Not only did this university turn me into a medical doctor, but as Norman mentioned, it was this university that catalyzed my professional speaking career. It was 4 years ago to this month that I was able to deliver a TEDx talk from this very stage. And it got me thinking, not only has this university supported me through my student years, but it's also enabled me in my years thereafter. And so for that, I'm truly, truly grateful. So would you join with me just putting your hands together for Lucia, for Norman, for the team for this event, for actually creating some space for us to get together tonight. Thank you so much. So good. Well, friends, as you know, I'm a medical doctor, and I've specialized in medicine of the mind. And that makes me a psychiatrist. So I know a thing or two about what makes people tick and how people think. But about 7 years ago, I went through some difficult circumstances in my life which really lifted the lid of what I expected from life. It really shifted my perspective. And I remember watching a YouTube video of a keynote speaker, and his name was Les Brown. And when I heard him say what he said, I imagined like I was getting one-to-one coaching from him. It's as if I had a direct experience with him. And he said, in my brain, Tharaka, it's not that people aim too high and miss. It's that they aim too low and hit. I thought, like, with everything that I know from the human mind, about decision-making, action-taking, result generation, that kind of fits. And then without knowing it, over the ensuing years, I ended up finding myself bringing a message to people outside of the healthcare setting into corporations, and now I'm blessed to be able to keynote in front of thousands of people and speak to C-suite leaders, helping them manage the mind so that they can manage their bottom line. And so that really is my passion for tonight. I want to speak about one thing and one thing only, and that is to think big. And just by way of a cheer, how many of us want to see some kind of improvement, some kind of growth in their personal or professional life? If that's you, say I. Okay, so although we don't know everyone in intimate detail, we already know something about each other, and that is that we have an appetite for growth. Okay, so what I want you to do, just to kick things off, is find someone near you, to your left or right, or behind or in front of you, give them a short, sharp high five, and say, we can do this. Can you do that? Find a friend nearby and say, we can do this. Okay, so good, so good. Some of you have not done that for too long, okay? It's good to get a sharp high five in. Well done. All right, well, we're going to talk about exactly this. Think big. I'm taking you on a journey that starts in your mind and hopefully takes you to a place of greater expectation of what life can be like. And in true entrepreneurial style, I want to start off with the problem. You see, the greatest battle is worth knowing about, because if we understand the battle, we can cook up the right strategies for this battle. And I want to start here, the brain. And specifically, the mind. You see, your mind is a little bit like this. It's busy, it's full of real estate, it's full of roads, and there's lots of traffic running up and down it through those intersecting junctions. You see, your brain is like a supercomputer. It has billions of actions running per second. It has a signal transmission speed of over 200 miles an hour. There are more connections in your brain than there are stars in this galaxy. We're talking trillions of connections. But the real point that I want to make for you, this first point that I want to make for you when we talk about what is this great battle for any of us in our working world, is that thoughts are real. Everyone shout real. Real. Now, you're having between 50 and 80,000 thoughts a day. Most of them you are unaware of. They're unconscious. But some of those thoughts are conscious. You are very aware of them. Like if I tell you, whatever you do, do not think of a giant yellow monster truck. Don't. No, don't. You're aware of that. You had a thought. What's interesting is that thoughts aren't ethereal. They actually have a physical substance in your brain. There are electrochemical and protein changes that occur on a synaptic level when you think. And to put it simply, the more you have a thought, the stronger connections become, and the less you have a thought, the weaker those connections become. Your ability to think is literally your ability to craft your own mind. It's like you're building new roads, or you're closing off roads and building other new roads, or going over some of those roads you've gone over time and time again. Every time you think, real estate is now occupied or remodeled in your brain. Thoughts are real. What about this guy? This is Henry Ford, the founder of the Ford Motor Company. What he did was he streamlined the production of the motor car. He created the production line, very efficient. And when I studied this guy, I came across a quote that he said, and some of you have heard this before. He said that if you think that you can, or if you think that you can't, you're right. In other words, the person that thinks that they can and the person that thinks that they can't are both right. Now, I thought to myself, does this fit? Does this fit with what I know about cognitive behavioral therapy-informed strategies? Does this make sense in the science world? Actually, it does. Not only are thoughts real, but thoughts are also powerful. Shout powerful. Powerful. Right, because apparently, thoughts have the ability to shape not only your decisions, actions, and results, but also what you become. It's like that old proverb, as a man thinketh in their own heart, so they are. It's verified by cognitive science. So what's the problem? Well, how many of you know that our minds have a bent for the negative? The time that we said that thing we shouldn't have said, or the time that we had spinach stuck in our teeth, or the time that you made that mistake, the error, the ball that you dropped, whatever. Our minds have a tendency to naturally gravitate toward the negative. If you know what I'm saying, say I. Right, okay. Oh yeah, that's true. It's true, Dr. T. It's true. It's so true. Our minds have a bent for the negative, and we can dwell there. I mentioned that we have between 50 and 80,000 thoughts a day. Well, maybe around 75%, 80 of them are actually negative thoughts. They sit in camp negative. Maybe it won't work. I'm not sure if this will take off. Maybe they'll laugh at me. Maybe I'll fail. Maybe this will hurt. Not today. And the list goes on and on and on. Ladies and gentlemen, the greatest battle for people in business, in the working world, if you're studying, or anywhere in between, the greatest battle isn't out there. It's between the ears. It's in the mind. So, okay, thanks very much, Dr. T. That's the greatest battle, so what can we do about that? Well, the great news is you can change your mind. You can change the way you think. Let me take you back to when I was a kid, and I went on a family holiday to Florida to do the whole theme park thing. And it was a really high-paced holiday because you're busy. And in the evening, every evening we'd come back to the pool to relax before dinner. Now, there was one night I remember being in the pool, just paddling around, and then I heard the most thunderous explosion. And it was as if everyone around the pool for a moment just froze in a moment of panic. And then suddenly everyone relaxed. But I didn't know what was going on. It was as if the air itself was vibrating. It was thunderous. And then people started saying, oh, no, it's the Kennedy Space Center. It's the rocket launch. Now, I couldn't see what was going on, but I could feel it. It was absolutely beltering. And when I look back on it, I had to think about, hey, is there a message in this? In order for a rocket to escape the gravitational pull of the Earth, it has to apply millions and millions of kilograms of thrust to reach what we call escape velocity. It has to overcome that natural Mother Earth pull downwards to go upwards. And I thought, hey, this is just how we think. You see, our minds have a bent for the negative. It's very easy for us to go, it won't work, or, why don't you try something that's realistic? Why don't you, play it safe, all that kind of stuff. That's the gravitational pull. That's the pattern of the world, right? But actually, the great news is that you can actively, with discipline, with focus, with drive, with passion, change the way you think and push against that gravitational pull of the mind and go the other way and think big. Isn't that good news? I think it's great news. As Arnold Schwarzenegger says, you've got to nay the naysayers. You've got to say no to those voices that tell you it's not going to work. As my friend Gary says, you've got to say no to the energy vampires. You've got to get away from those people so that you can actually focus on what really matters to you. You can change your mind. You can actually transform yourself by renewing your mind. And it can look really beautiful. Sometimes there's a price to pay, there's a cost to put in, there's sweat to be had to make that mission that you think that you're called to, that's worth doing, happen. There's a price to pay, there's a cost, there's an expense to be made in thinking differently, in going against the status quo to release yourself from that pattern of gravity and get that zero gravity thinking. But it looks good. So how do you do that? Well, let me take you to this wonderful cognitive strategy called reframing. And it begins with this gentleman, Thomas Edison. Now, if we wind the clock back to the 1800s, it was literally dark. The commercially viable light bulb did not exist. There was a filament light bulb, but the problem with the filament light bulb at that time was that it just burned out way too quickly. It wouldn't last long enough to actually be worth buying. But Thomas Edison thought to change the status quo. And so, as the story goes, he tried, and then he failed. And he tried, and then he failed. And then he tried, and then he failed. Then he tried, and he failed. And if you look at what he says when he eventually succeeds, he says, I didn't fail 9,999 times. I only found 9,999 ways not to make a light bulb. I only needed to find one way to make it work. That is a reframe on failure. Well, does this fit with cognitive science? Well, actually it does. You might have heard of something called the growth mindset. Carol Dweck is the big name behind this. The growth mindset simply states that if you believe that you can grow, you're going to grow. And if you believe that you're not, then you won't. So kids with their grades in school were tested, growth mindset kids versus fixed mindset kids. Those that believed that their intellectual capacity could be expanded, guess what happened to their grades? They improved with time because every test that they did was a learning experience. But for those that believed that their intellectual capacity was fixed, I found this really interesting. I thought their results would just plateau, but they actually got worse. They actually got worse. The fixed mindset wasn't where you choose to level off, it was where you chose to nosedive. So anyway, I kind of think about this. I think about the growth mindset a lot, and it reminds me of a time where I was playing table football. Do you want to know about the time I played table football? You do? Okay, that's good. It just so happens that I have a story about table football. Okay, last summer, true story, I and my little daughter, who's age 6, her name's Aria. She's a funny little character, a little bit sporty and mischievous, and she's just really great fun. She's beautiful. She and I go along to one of my colleagues' garden parties in the summer. So we drive along to Banchory, we show up, the sun's shining, and then we walk into this hustly, bustly place, and there's a marquee. So we go into the marquee, and there's lots of adults shouting and chatting and laughing. And then over at the side, I see a foosball table. And I kid you not, when I saw it, I just started strutting over to it. It felt like it was a scene from like some 1980s pool hall hustler film. And I went over to the two that were playing it, and I put my fist down, and I challenged them. And those two 8-year-olds, they looked at me, and they said, okay, let's do it. So those two are at one side. I'm ready to go on this side. Aria's ready to go beside me. And we put the ball in, and then we play. So the ball's bouncing around this foosball table like a pinball machine, and it's exciting. Charlie and Jemima, they get a goal, so we slide their dice up. Then Dr. T and Aria, we get a goal, so we slide our dice up. And they get a goal, and we get a goal, and they get a goal. And then it came to a point where Charlie and Jemima started to break away. They started to get more goals than we did. And it came to this point when it was 9-4. Next goal for them, win, okay? Anyway, the ball goes in, and there's some crazy pinball thing that happens, and then Jemima passes to Charlie, Charlie passes to Jemima nutmegs Dr. T, and then Charlie puts it in the back straight past Aria, the goalkeeper, in that wooden box of the net, and then they win. And at that moment, those two kids jump up, and they punch the air, and they go, we win! And at that moment, Aria and I jump up, we high-five each other, and I say to her, we never lose, we only win or learn. That's a reframe of failure. And I know how precious her mind is, her little mind, that is growing up in this world, trying to understand what's possible, trying to understand like where she fits. And I wanted her to know that actually her core value isn't measured in how many goals she gets, how many Facebook likes she gets, what her financial bottom line is, or any of that. But that actually failure is a learning opportunity. You know, growth, fixed mindset. You know, I can't do this. Growth mindset. We can learn how to do this. Fixed mindset. They are so much better than me. Growth mindset. What can I learn from them? Fixed mindset. I can't believe he's got a Porsche. Growth mindset. How do I get one? You can reframe, same statue, different angle, to really change the emotion and chemistry activity in your brain, which is really a big part of thinking big. So where do we go from there? Well, let me talk to you about belief, big belief. You see, when little kids need motivation, they just need to go to the bar. But not that kind of bar. This bar. With big belief, there's big action. With big action, there are big results. Where there's big belief, there's big action. Where there's big action, there's big results. So we think about those kids that believe that they can grow. Okay, I'm about to sit a test. I believe that I can grow. This is a learning experience. My life is ahead of me. Big belief. They take big action. They give it their best shot. Whatever the results come back as, they view as a learning experience. Did I fail? No, I haven't failed. I just haven't passed yet. And so that reinforces their belief that they're on a learning journey. Fixed mindset? Well, I believe that I'm not going to grow. What kind of action do I take? A smaller action, an action that's consistent with that kind of rate-limiting belief. What kind of results do I get? I get 8 out of 10 in my arithmetic test. See, those 2 that I got wrong prove that I'm not doing well. What does that do to my belief? It confirms that rate-limiting belief that I'm not going to grow. And so then I get caught in this downward spiral. But with big belief comes big action. With big action comes big results. Say that with me. With big belief comes big, and with big action comes big. Okay, one more time. With big belief comes big, and with big action comes big results. But how do we take belief a little step further? Let's talk about vision. How many of you have a Microsoft computer on your desk at work or at home? Big wave. Do you know that the founding belief of Microsoft with Bill Gates was that we at Microsoft see and believe a time in this world where there is one of our computers on every desk and in every home? That is a massive vision. How many of you would have believed him when he said that? That sounds insane, right? It sounds crazy. It sounds not of this world. It sounds very zero gravity. And in fact, with that big vision, they took big action. And with big action, they got big results. So my question to you is, what is it that you see? What's your vision? Because if you want to get somewhere, you want to see that place, right? You need a picture of your destination. What's the vision that you have for those of you who are studying? What is the vision that you have for those of you who are working, that are running businesses or building more businesses? What is the vision that you have for your personal life, for your mental agility, for your relationships, for your nearest and dearest? What is the vision? What does the picture look like? What is the time that you see for your life in all of these different departments in your life? With big belief comes big, and with big action comes big. Right, okay, you're getting this. This is good. This is good. Okay, so you can have big belief, and you can have the big action. You can renew your thinking. You can have your growth mindset. You can have all of that. But I would say there's another special ingredient that you need. And let me tell you a story. I don't mean to brag, but a few years ago, I was driving a Rolls Royce, and it was a nice car. When I got this test drive, it was exciting. Actually, I had the choice of driving 3 cars. I had the choice of driving a Lotus Elise, an Aston Martin Vantage, or a Rolls Royce Dawn. How did I decide which of the 3 I wanted to drive? I Googled each of their retail shop prices, and I went for the most expensive. So I knew that this car was going to be at least 300 grand, which was more than the value of the house I was living in at the time. What's more, we were actually trying to move house that time, and we were having trouble shifting the house off the market. Anyway, I turn up to the test drive zone, and I fill in the waiver. I bring my wife with me because I thought this would look really impressive, because she's going to see her husband drive a really, really swish car. Anyway, she saw the excess that I was signing up to and knew I couldn't afford it, and she said, if you curb one of these alloys, we will never be able to move, ever. So anyway, I already knew how that was going to go with her. Anyway, we walk up to this car, because, sir, your test drive awaits. And I walk up to one of the most astonishing cars I've ever seen. It was cream, but the paint itself was like glass. Like, when I looked at the front of it, it was royalty itself. And the doors don't even open like normal car doors. No, they open the other way, like a welcoming hug. And so I walk up into this Rolls Royce and I look at the carpets. The carpets are red velvet. Red velvet carpets in a car. In a car. And the seats were cream. And it's a cream leather interior, of course, and the dashboard was a combo of some really, really fine wood and some really cool tech. The whole thing was amazing. So I climb in. I don't have to shut the door because the doors just close themselves, because that's what this Rolls Royce does. And then there's the Rolls Royce rep sitting beside me in the passenger seat, and I'm looking in the rear view mirror at Isla, my wife, sitting in the back, shaking like a human sewing machine. She's super anxious, and I think, okay, well, this is a really, really fun date right now. Anyway, I take this car for a spin, and I sail it along Queen's Road and into West Hill. I literally was driving a yacht. And I came back, and then I got out, and I thanked the Rolls-Royce guy for the test drive. And then I helped my wife out of the car on a stretcher, kind of, and then she eventually calmed down. She didn't speak to me for the rest of the day, but that's how it went. And it made me think that some of us here are working really, really hard. We're working really hard with big belief. You're taking big action, and you haven't got the results you want yet. And you're pushing, and you're pushing, and you're pushing, and you're thinking, when am I going to get my breakthrough? When is this going to happen? Am I even doing the right thing here at all? And it's breaking you at times, and you think, why did I even get into this in the first place? But I'd wonder, is maybe something beautiful being formed in what you're doing? Is there some greatness in you being formed in what you're doing? Because the next time you feel like you're working hard, it's taking too long, and you're not getting the results, just remember that it takes 6 months to build a Rolls Royce and only 13 hours to build a Toyota. A lot of us in business have got giant challenges around us. You've got challenges with people. You've got challenges with clients. You've got challenges with your marketing. You've got challenges left, right, and center. No one is short of challenges. If you feel like you don't have any, it's because you've just been through some, or maybe you are going through some, or you're heading into some. There are challenges everywhere you go. And many of these challenges just feel way too big. They feel giant. Who killed Goliath? David. David killed Goliath. That old legend says that this shepherd boy killed this giant, fierce, gruesome killing machine. What I think is really interesting about this situation is that this boy wins. How is it that he wins? Well, if you look through the record, it says that he had this big belief. He had this big belief that he was destined to become king of his nation. He had that belief. Some VIP came and told him that, I bestow this on you. This is what's going to happen. You are going to become king. And then he now finds himself in a fight to the death with a giant. And the history account says that he picked up a sling and a stone and he was swinging it around. And I often wonder what was going on in David's mind when he was about to take on this professional killing machine. I wonder what he was thinking when he was just swinging that stone round and round and round. And this is what I think he thought. He thought, I'm supposed to be king, and I'm not king yet. This is a fight to the death. So Goliath, it kind of sucks to be you. There are so many challenges around us. There are challenges in healthcare. There are challenges in climate change. There are challenges in tech. There are challenges everywhere that you are, in your sphere of influence, here to solve. But some of them will feel like a Goliath. Some of them will feel way too big. But just remember, sometimes it takes a Goliath to be positioned in front of you for you to realize the David within you. And Nelson Mandela said that it's only impossible until someone does it. It used to be impossible to fly, yet you go to and from work on a chair in the air. It used to be impossible to run 100 meters in less than 10 seconds. It used to be impossible to have the internet in your pocket. What impossibilities are you going to be solving? Because it's only impossible until you solve it. So friends, I'm working my story out, and I want to encourage you in yours. You have the opportunity to beat the greatest battle which exists here within the mind. You have the opportunity to renew your thinking and escape the gravitational pull of the naysayers. Reframe your thinking. See failure as learning. To have big belief, take big action and big results with great vision, mixed in the bowl with patience and the tenacity to take on the Goliath-sized problems in your life. You can do all of this. And so my encouragement to you is that wherever you are, you're amazing. Go do it, go smash it, and think big. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. T, for that. Now, we do have about 15 minutes for questions. Now, the way the system works in here is on the right-hand side of the desk, there is a button that says Speak. So if you would like to ask a question, if you press that button, I'll see a red light comes on the amplifier, so if you would like to ask a question. But I would actually like to ask Dr. T a question, and it's actually my experience of taking students over to America. And I've taken undergraduate real estate students to a competition in New York. And I've found that the Aberdeen students have been technically very good, but they've been blown away by the confidence of the American grad student. And my question really is whether our system of education slightly belittles our confidence, and whether this belief of reframing and reprogramming needs to start in the schools as well as in universities. So in other words, are we as Aberdonians and as Scottish people rather hidden doon in the way we approach things?
It's a great question. It's a great question. I would say that culture has a great effect on how we think, because how we think is contagious. You know yourself that if you're in the room of people that have blue sky thinking, then you're encouraged to do the same. And if you're around people that come up with a problem for every solution, then that kind of takes you down too. I think that that culture doesn't clamp on our ceiling of our thought life in primary school, but perhaps even younger. You know, the last time I've ever seen someone celebrate failure is when a baby trips up when they're trying to walk, right? What do we do when that baby kind of gets up on their jelly legs and falls flat on their face? We go, yeah, you're so good, you're so amazing. And I think that's the last time that we culturally celebrate failure in that way. Yet we do that in such a good way to help a kid develop. And I think that we can always work and moderate the cultural atmosphere that we're in when it comes to being confident. You used the word confident, And that comes from the Latin word confidare. Fidare means to trust, and con means in myself, so it's to have trust in myself. And so if we are not permitted culturally to actually acknowledge that, hey, you know what, I feel that I've got a gift in X, Y, and Z, and I want to bring that to the table. If that becomes a difficult thing to say culturally, then of course we would pull back. And so the great news is that we can change that. The great news is that we can always moderate that, we can always improve that.
Well, do we have any questions? Yeah.
So thank you. That was really inspiring.
Thank you.
You mentioned earlier that the brain concentrates on the negative and tends to concentrate on the negative. Does psychiatry understand why? It sounds counterintuitive that our brains would do that.
It's a great question. The important word there is tendency. I'm not for a minute saying that our brains are wired to think negatively. Our brains have a tendency to think negatively. And I think your question is about how is that intuitive? That feels counterintuitive. So I think that the root understanding to that negative thinking on autopilot is to do with our survivalist nature, our need to protect myself. Maybe that's dangerous. Maybe that's too hot. Maybe I'm going to get my head bitten off. Maybe And so we're very, very risk averse, which is an important thing for survival. But when that's unmanaged, then we start settling for less. Can I just make a follow-on comment to that? There are over 188 cognitive biases documented. Cognitive biases, by the way, are the automatic shortcuts that your mind takes without you really putting thought into it. And what we're talking about right now is called the negativity bias. Entrepreneurs can suffer from the opposite. And when I say suffer, you need it. It's the positivity bias or the optimum bias. So you don't see why it won't work. You will see why this will work. You will say why this will work. This is my new idea, it's my new venture, this will work, okay? And it's a cognitive bias which you need to push an idea through to fruition. And what's really interesting is when that entrepreneur who's up on Sunday night, who gets this idea in bed, comes into work on Monday morning and goes into the boardroom and says, hey guys, I've got this really great idea, you will naturally, not always, but often naturally see the negativity bias in everyone around the table. They'll come up with a problem for your solution. So if you know that, you don't have to get mad at them now, and you can kind of go, okay, I understand what they're doing here, but guys, can you park the negativity bias for a moment? Can you shift your mindset to see where I'm coming from? And then likewise, as the budding entrepreneur, can you come back to where they're seeing it from, and when we have a multi-perspective conversation? But anyway, there's a little bit more on that.
Okay. Yes, please.
Hello.
Hi.
I could sit here all night and ask you questions, but I'll focus on the one that sort of challenges me in my professional life, which is, as a nation, we've got an obesity crisis, and it's how do we take head on that challenge using this kind of positive approach, because there's so many things that prevent people from tackling their weight problem, and one of them is they just don't ever see themselves becoming lighter, slimmer. It's a problem that's too big. They're fighting against corporations pushing for greater consumption. So I just wondered if you had any suggestions or ideas on how, as a nation, we could use this thinking to tackle obesity.
I love the small scope of that question right there. Give me like 3 seconds before I figure out how to solve national obesity. I think that's a superb question. All right, here's a real practical example. I mean, in our conversation there, what we did there naturally, because we have to address the problem, was we focused on the problem. We have a problem here. The problem is that, obesity is a barrier. We're not getting past it. And then if you and I brainstormed on this and thought, okay, how do we reframe this? Why don't we actually pick up all the obesity testimonies that we can find? Actually, these are 10 case studies of people that suffered with morbid obesity. They went through this program, and now they've got this new result. These are the economic benefits of their better health. There's less medical bills. There's less strain on the economy. They're actually producing more into the economy through their work, et cetera, et cetera. And so now what we're doing is we're looking at the problem from another angle. Okay, we're looking at the same problem, different angle, and actually when we give this story, when we give the gain frame story, we start releasing a whole bunch of helpful chemicals and hormones in the brain, which drive motivation. And so you can get more buy-in sometimes by showing people hope, in addition to the problem. Does that make sense? And when we talk about physical health, and when we talk about, 95% of all health conditions in some way are connected to neurotransmitter activity in the mind. So the mind is very wired into everything that's going on. And weight control issues or all the other medical causes that can create obesity are related to that. So I don't think it's like a one-size-fits-all solution, but I do think that sometimes it requires tackling issues of my sense of self, who am I as a person, failures, life stories, all that kind of stuff. There's a whole bunch of therapeutic complexities in the background, but that one takeaway I just gave you is you could reframe the problem and then speak to people that way and generate sort of an opportunity mindset in your stakeholders.
No, press it again, I think.
Oh, there we are.
That's it.
Hi.
I'm thinking, I was wanting to follow up on Norman's question, but I think it's probably related to the question you've just answered as well, but I'm trying to make it a bit smaller scale. So in terms of having more confidence and changing the mindset, how was my question, but I was thinking, if we were trying to help, so Norman's example of the students going into a competition, what are the things that we can do to try and help make that change in mindset?
Okay, I love this. We're now gravitating into a personal development masterclass, which is completely cool. So you might want to write this down. I call it the 3 W's. What went well? What went well? What went well is a simple exercise that you can practice over and over again to actually build up roads in your brain that are carrying positive traffic. What went well is simply, at the end of the day, bust out a pen, a piece of paper, and write down 3 things that went well that day. 3 things that went well that day. When somebody asks you, how was your day? You don't naturally talk about what went well. You might say, well, it was tough or it was busy, and that's kind of the brain's autopilot. We gravitate that way. But if you force your brain to look for anything good in that pain that you've had today, or it may not have been painful, you're now actually engaging what we call your prefrontal cortex. It sits here in the front of your brain. It's the puppet master, it's the executive that starts to actively hunt around for information over and above your autopilot. So do it pen and paper rather than type with your thumbs on a phone or even speak it out. All of that's helpful, but for neurobiological reasons, we actually process information differently. We process it better when we write it down. You start to make promises to yourself when you write. You start to create challenges for yourself when you write, when you scribe things down. So what went well is a really good exercise. You can do that with your teams. So when I go into exec teams and I help them with their culture, I might help them, encourage them to do a what went well huddle. So it's part of like their Monday morning or their Friday afternoon. It's something that's built in to their regular lifestyle. So they're building brain muscle to look for the things that are going well and owning them. And it's okay to own that, hey, we did that great. High five team, we did that great. It's okay to own that. And so you can do that sort of collectively. That's an example, a very simple example. And I've had a lot of feedback from teams that do that, and they go, we've created our own What Went Well journal, and it's working well. No surprise there. So it's good.
So I think then over to you. Yeah.
Dr. T, where would you draw a line between acting big and acting reckless?
Yeah, okay. So reckless, do you mean like delusional? Is that what you mean? Like actually?
It's like when someone literally betting a farm on something, and it's for people around, it's obvious that the consequence, the learning experience he's embracing may cost him maybe very pricey. It might take him years to recover to pay for that learning experience. Where would you draw a line? Like I'm ready to embrace this learning experience, or it's just acting reckless.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't think, number one, I would find it hard to create a formula for where that line sits that you can apply to every situation. I really do think it's on a case-by-case basis. I have had the privilege of meeting and creating relationships with very successful people in the city and across the country, and I learn a lot from them. And some of the stories I've heard is that to actually get these big results, it actually has taken a lot of expense. And sometimes they tell me, and be careful, Tharaka, it's all right to work hard for the future, but make sure you don't do that at the expense of present beauty. Yeah. It's okay to work hard for the future, but don't do that at the expense of present beauty. So I've met some people who have built massive corporations, but they completely lost sight of their key relationships in life. So they did life lonely, or they lost sight of their physical health and then they got sick. Or they lost sight of the stress that they've had, and so they managed it through gambling or some other kind of addiction, and they kind of went off the rails. So there's all that kind of stuff to kind of take into account. But the other thing is that the reality of big results is actually it takes a whole bunch of work. I haven't yet met a super successful top 1% type person in sport or in theatre and acting or in business or anything like that that hasn't told me that it takes hard work, which again fits with all the theory, right? If we go back to Microsoft, hey, we're going to start this thing and see a world that's filled with our computers on every desk at home and workplace. I'm pretty sure that came with hard work, yet they got that result. But a practical takeaway here is that, if you've got a great idea, why don't you share it with people that you trust, that understand you, that know where you want to go, that understand your life, and get some feedback from them. Because it might be that they say, hey, that's a great idea, go, I can see how this works. Or they might even pick out your blind spot and say, this is great, but the risk is if you work too hard here, you're going to fall off the wagon in X, Y, and Z. And getting some feedback from people that you trust, from your community, surrounding yourself with good people, all that can be quite helpful as well.
Okay.
Yeah? Okay. Good.
Okay, the lady there.
So kind of going back to one of the other questions, when you were speaking about, you've kind of reframed yourself, you've got the big beliefs, you're going for it and you're having a bit of patience, how would you deal in a practical sense with the people who can be blockers? The people that are on the other camp where they're not growth-minded and they're, why do you want to do that? And kind of putting blockers in, particularly in a workplace when it can come from managers and you're trying to bypass them effectively, and that can be quite difficult. So what kind of techniques in a practical sense could you help to maybe get them round, or see a different point of view?
Sure. If I break your question into parts and answer the first part that I'm making up in my mind, is it possible to create influence in that positive way that you're thinking about on other people? The answer is yes, it is absolutely possible. And then part two is, well, what does that require? So I think it requires things on your part, and I think it requires things on your co-worker's part or your manager's part, because at the end of the day, people can resist, and you know that. You'll know people in your life that are they are where they are, and you're not going to shift them. You can't uproot them. And so I think there's two sort of bits there. What I find is interesting is that when you have two people in fMRI scanners, and you look at the colors that light up in their brains, and person A engages with person B in a story, say, for example. Person A is telling a story, and you look at the color pattern in their mind, in their brain that lights up. What's interesting is as the listener listens on to the proponent of that information, of the emotion, their brain starts to mirror a very similar color pattern to the original person. What does this mean? It means that the extent of our mind isn't literally walled off by our skull. There's a sense of getting your mind into someone else's mind and someone else getting their mind into your mind. And that's what empathy is actually all about. We have neurons that are designed to connect and wire up, and so if I'm doing this right, some of what I'm feeling right now, you'll be feeling too, okay? And so is it possible to spread emotion? Yes. We call it the emotional contagion. I have a day job besides the keynote speaking. I work as a medical doctor still, practicing. And one of the things that I bring to this organization that I work in is the emotional contagion. It's just one of the things I can do for my organization. So I can bring energy in. And I've seen this energy go horizontally to my colleagues, and people actually, they're changing their expectation of what we can do as a health service. So we've become very innovative. Also, I've seen it go upstream. I've seen it go upstream to other managers and leaders who I'm very privileged to be led and managed by. But what I'm trying to say is that, yes, it's possible. But we've also heard these very true stories of it hits the ceiling and you can't shift it. And sometimes it's about making a decision of how long am I willing to try creating a change here to push it upstream before I need to make a decision about what do I do differently. Do I sidestep? Do I change something about my current working condition? Do I have to have a meeting with my manager to work out, is there something that we can do to improve workplace productivity? And have those conversations. It's very difficult to have the emotional conversations, but if we keep it about actions and results, culture, actions, results, then there are other ways. So there's a few different solutions, but it is possible. Be the emotional contagion. Don't let the bad news stop you from spreading good news. It helps to have compliant and understanding and open-minded leaders as well, if you're talking about sending it upward. Okay? Yeah.
Okay, how are we doing? If any, maybe one more question? Yep.
Hiya.
I'm on, yeah.
Yes,
Am I on?
You certainly are.
I think you've probably answered some of this, but I'm just thinking about, after listening to this amazing lecture that you've done, or talk that you've done, and I'm a big fan, by the way.
Thank you.
Big fan.
I appreciate it.
That we're very aware at the moment in society that there's all these not think big, but kind of vision board kind of presentations and YouTube things going on where everybody can, you can have your dream, just do a vision board and think positive and it'll all go. We've got all these out there, and people throwing out these workshops and things with very little understanding about how, as you said, the brain works. And we have, which I find as a therapist, there's people coming in who have got anxiety, who are riddled with guilt and shame, and they're going on all these different workshops, and it's making them feel worse. So it's because there's a lack of understanding about how we develop and how we react to things. So I'm just thinking, where would this, where do we go with this? And, it would be really good to have this starting in schools, where they're teaching them this at a young age. So by the time we get into, start to change the way we view life as we get older, it's because I'm finding that a bit of an issue, with all these workshops that's going on, with a lack of understanding.
Sure. It's a good point. I take what you say about having a desire to see the education system change, or the culture of the growth mindset in the education system change, and that would be a good thing, and I think that I've seen that happen already. But the great news is that we don't even have to wait for schools. If you've got kids, you can start growth mindset in your kids already, right? You can, for example, I've done this with my kids. We've printed out a little meme from growth mindset, and they have it on their wall. I remember my little boy who's 4 going, "I can't do this," and then Aria runs up the stairs and she looks at the table and looks at "I can't do this" and follows it along to the growth mindset, and she reads, "Oh, I can learn to do this," and then she runs downstairs and then she says to little Elijah, "You can learn to do this." And that's just basic parenting. That's just, we've got access to doing that to our kids, or spreading that. So yeah, absolutely, we want this to be widespread. And at the same time, we can also do something about that right now, starting with ourselves.
We've just got one more question. Actually, you talk about growth mindset, and we've been talking about children. Is it technically more difficult to change your mindset as you get older?
It's a good question. A child's brain, by about age 6, has 110 of adult brain synaptic connections. It's a lot more rich and fertile, and there's a lot of neuroplasticity up for grabs. There's a lot of change that you can do. The great news for everybody is that the brain stays neuroplastic throughout life, and that you can make changes when you were a child. You can also make changes when you're an adult, which is why therapy for adults even exists, or any kind of modality to help people feel better, think better, to have meditation apps and all that kind of stuff. There's good news for everybody. But I'm pretty intrigued about something called the Heckman equation, which is basically a sloping curve like this. And this bottom axis here is age, and this here is economic ROI, return on investment, meaning that when you sow into the life of somebody, you get a return on investment. When you help somebody, they end up upskilling, they become a better contributor to society, less crime, less economic drain, all that kind of stuff. Right, so you get an ROI when you help somebody. What's interesting is the earlier you help somebody, the higher the ROI, okay? So you get more bang for your buck in terms of the amount of money you put into helping a young mind, and the ROI you get there compared to helping someone later in their life is less, but there's still an ROI.
Great, thank you. That's a big relief for me, actually, that particular answer. So,
great news.
What went well? I thought that was excellent. What didn't go quite so well was we didn't quite have long enough, I think, and we could have probably carried on the conversation for at least another half hour. But ladies and gentlemen, could you thank Dr. T for his talk? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So we're open for networking. There's tea and coffee at the back, and we look forward to seeing you at the other events. Please come along and register, and thank you very much for coming.